Welcome to the Getting Real with Hillary show. Inspiring stories that change lives. Where ordinary heroes tell their extraordinary stories of how they have triumphed over unexpected challenges. This is where we say what can't be said and use the AAA formula for freedom. Awareness, acceptance, and action. Now, here's your host, Hillary Burns.
Well, welcome to the Getting Real with Hillary show. And today I have some very exciting news. I have a new sponsor, and the new sponsor is Kokori app. Kokori makes corporate team building and school social emotional learning fun. Help your teams or students create community and connection with social emotional learning. That is not just one more thing on your plate, but that is fun for you and your students and corporate teams. Visit kokoriapp.com for more information. And I happen to know personally, this is an amazing company. My daughter works for them. She's the, the director of some design. She designs the app, and it's beautiful, and the people are amazing. And when they do these activities, your life does get more connected, more fun, and just alters your life. So I invite you to visit kokoriapp.com to get more information. Now, today I am here with a very special guest, award-winning Erika Hayasaki. And Erika, well, we're gonna get into it. There's a lot I could say about Erika, but we're gonna just kind of launch into the dialogue, and you're gonna hear what she's been up to and the book that she's written. Well, I can tell you about that because I do have it. It's called Somewhere Sisters. And I'll tell you what, I read it on the way to, oops, I can't show it because I forgot to click my green screen. All right, let me fix that. And, but anyway, wait, hold on a second. I want you to be able to see it. There we go. Okay, so Somewhere Sisters, a story of adoption, identity, and the meaning of family, which is such a fascinating story. I can't wait to talk about it with Erika. And welcome, Erika.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You got your coffee? You're all set?
Almost.
Oh no! All right. Well, we've had some excitement getting on today, but we're here now, and I can't wait to hear about. You're all right? You need to get it, or you want to?
I'll get it.
It's being brought to you.
I have some drink and some water.
Okay. All right. If you need to run and get it, I can talk. But
no, we're good. We're good.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So Erika, tell me about. First, I want to hear about you, and then we'll talk about the book. How did you get started? I mean, obviously, you're a journalist. What was your childhood like that you ended up being a journalist? Because most people want to be and they don't end up doing it. So how did you make that happen?
That's a good question. Well, I was born in Champaign, Illinois, and that's a small college town. And I was raised in the Midwest for part of my life, and it was a good place to grow up. But also there were times when I encountered some racism, being Asian American. So I think that sort of led me to start writing. And I know that started to me writing when I was younger. And then I ended up getting into journalism. Even in high school, I moved to the Seattle area, ended up moving and getting into high school there. And I also went into journalism through some internships and Seattle Times programs, majored in journalism. It went back to the University of Illinois, majored in journalism. And then I ended up at the LA Times when I was like 21.
Wow.
I was writing for the LA Times for a good 9 years. I was a national correspondent for the LA Times based in New York. And I wrote a book at that point in my life. It's called The Death Class, and I spent several years shadowing a professor and her students in New Jersey she's a professor who studies death, and she would teach her classes in the middle of cemeteries or take her students to prison on, have them talk to people on death row. And,
What
that
was
was
it called? The death what?
the death class.
What's
Yeah,
the class?
it's called the death class, and it's normal.
What's the second word?
The death class, CLASS. So it's a class.
Oh, class.
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
it's a university class.
Oh, okay. I was like, clap. I couldn't figure out what. Okay, all right. So the death class. So that whole class was on death. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, and spent time with her writing a book with her, and about, she's in the main character, and then there's different students in the book, and I took the class. And that came out in 2014, and then now I teach journalism at UC Irvine, a literary journalism program, and I write for magazines. So I started a freelance, magazine writing career, and I write for the New York Times Magazine and Wired and Atlantic and other places like that. So mostly feature stories. So that's how I became a journalist, and now I have written a second book.
Yeah. So just going back, was it hard to get that first job at the LA Times when you were 21? Or was
It was through an internship program, so
okay.
it was hard. Yeah, it was very competitive. It was an internship program for people ranging from out of college to mid-career, and it was very competitive, and they flew us all out there, and ended up, some of us got into the program and some did not, but it was a lot of work. It was breaking news and doing a lot of pretty intense kind of reporting, a lot of reporting around traumatic events, that sort of what led me to the book, because I had to do a lot of reporting on plane crashes, shootings, train crashes, all kinds of things.
Wow. So the first book, you mean the death class?
Yeah, the death.
Yeah. Wow, that's a whole nother topic, right? So okay, so you've had this crazy now, did you go traveling all over the place? If there was a plane crash, were you one of the people that would fly there and be there?
Yeah, I was. I guess one of the major stories that I covered at that time was the shootings at Virginia Tech University, when so that one I remember quite vividly. I do write about it in the book, because I ended up, the shootings were happening, and I got on a plane that day and had to fly into Virginia and spend a couple weeks in Virginia, interviewing, family members and teachers and people who'd survived. And it was really tough, that was unfortunately one of the mass shootings in a college campus. One of the biggest ones, but unfortunately there have been so many more since, but those type of situations take a toll on you as a journalist, I think, when you're writing about trauma so deeply and right in the aftermath of it. And certainly it's hard for families, and some of them talk to you, some of them don't want to, but that's sort of the job that I was doing for a long time. And then I decided to leave and try journalism. Try teaching journalism and writing, freelancing and things like that. Because the breaking news part of it it's a lot of work. It's hard and demanding, and it's also emotionally taxing.
So was writing the death class, did it help you like release some of it or get through some of it or heal some of that or
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the professor, her name is Norma Bowe. I still talk to her today. She still does the class. She's an incredible professor, and she told me that if I wanted to write about her, I would need to take the class myself, and so I did. And one of my first encounters with death was the murder of my 16-year-old friend when I was in high school, which is something I ended up also writing about.
Wow.
By her abusive boyfriend on the day of the Oklahoma City bombings. And that was something that I ended up processing through years later through the taking this one, this professor's class. And it was just the way that she ended up kind of exposing her students to different aspects of death to make it less scary, to make us understand, it sounds like we should know that life is precious and, just to sort of pay attention to the moments. But that was really how the whole class was designed to take some of the fear away and whatever other emotions that, you might have around death and just confront it or live with it, sit with it, and also enjoy, life.
Yeah.
It was for me a life-changing experience for sure. And not that I, have not like you'll ever overcome these fears of death or anxieties, but certainly it's helped me to think about it in a different way.
Mm. And what school was she teaching that at?
She teaches at Kane University in New Jersey.
Okay. Wow. That's really interesting. Um, yeah, my aunt just passed away and my mom has dementia and it's just kind of there, like,
Yeah.
I mean, if my sister and I were talking, my mom, my sister had been at my mom's house and she left. And my mom called her and she's like, "Oh, where are you going?" Like she had no recollection that she was there. She had just left. And my sister and I were just like, wow. Like if that was me, I would be freaking out. But my mom is just happy and fun and living today. Like she's not in a fear mode and
Yeah.
she's 92. So it's so interesting to look at that. I mean, it's a disease. It's like cancer, but it's different and it just affects someone differently. But
Yeah.
it's always there. Like, is that going to be me? Well, how will I be? And it's like, no, stay here now. We're not there. Let that go.
Yeah.
But it's always, your thoughts kind of go crazy. So
Yeah, and I guess a couple of themes that run through my work. Also, one of the big ones is identity, and so I've written about people who've had different forms of dementia or who've had the loss of, like, they don't have the ability to have certain memories at all.
mm-hmm.
And the questions that arise for me, are often around the quality of a life or um, what makes you who you are if you don't have your memories or access to certain parts of yourself, or if that changes and what people think about, might think about you or how you might view yourself. So I've that's something that I'm thinking. I think a lot about these hard issues, I guess, and
Yeah.
mental health, and those are some. Also, I thank you for sharing that about your family as well.
Yeah. And where do you write about that? Is that another book or are those just your articles?
So I have a I've written for piece. I wrote a piece for Wired, which was a piece about a woman, Susie McKinnon is her name, and she has no access to her episodic memory. So that means the scenes of your life. And so I profiled her. She has the access to her semantic memory, which is like sort of the Wikipedia page version of her life. And she knows the details and facts, but can't remember the scenes of her life. So I was interested in what that was like. And I wrote a profile of her for Wired. And then I wrote another piece about, it was for California Sunday Magazine. And it was a piece about a man named Joel Dreyer. He was living his life, had a very successful life as a psychiatrist, and married and had children, and suddenly his personality began to change dramatically. He started selling drugs, left his wife, got arrested. He became quite a known drug dealer in California, and he gets arrested and ends up in prison, which is where I met him. And I also interviewed members of his family. But what happened I interviewed him when he was in prison, and I also looked at his records. They realized during the course of his trial that he had developed something called frontotemporal dementia, which is just
Mm.
a kind of dementia that impacts the prefrontal cortex and of your brain, which is the where some of your kind of moral decision making can be affected if you have this particular dementia, or sort of your filter, I guess, for shame or for maybe stepping over the line into committing a crime. And there are studies around that I was able to pull and talk to researchers. And so it's not just a story about a man who ended up selling drugs. Clearly, it was
Right.
about what happens when your personality so dramatically changes and impacts the lives of everybody around you to this extent. So those are just a couple of examples. I've written others as well.
Wow. Have you heard of a guy? I heard him on a podcast, Daniel Amen. I think that's how you say it. He's got a company called Brain MD. And
He might be, he might have been in somebody that I think I do. I think I've heard. I think I've researched a little bit.
yeah, because he says, some of the kids that are acting strange and stuff, if they go back, they've either had an injury or a traumatic event that can do that, that can totally alter their behavior. So you wonder if that's what caused that dementia. Yeah, I just wonder because that's what runs
It's the
in
same
the
kind of
family.
thing. I wonder because when I did the story about Joel Dreyer and his story, I ended up coming across a research study about inmates in a Colorado jail, and psychologists had studied all of these inmates that were in this jail. They were allowed into the jail to study their brains. They were not just psychologists, but neurologists. And so I ended up writing a piece for Newsweek on that and going to the prison, to the jail, interviewing not only the inmates, but the researchers, because they found an extraordinarily high number of the people who had been arrested and put into this facility had traumatic brain injuries at some point in their life. So they were not only studying their brains, but their life stories about various brain injuries that they had had. And at one point, the number was I think it was as high as 90%, but I think that became lower as the research went on, but still well over 50%. And so that, of course, raises questions that are important for the courts too.
Yeah.
Yeah, big, huge questions that that society has to kind of grapple with and think about.
Yeah, these aren't just like bad people, someone, and this is off topic, but I was listening to someone say that children always have good intentions. They're never trying to be bad, but it's like, bad kid, bad kid. No, they're not. They have a reason for doing what they do. So people aren't inherently bad, but with getting hit on the head, like boom, all of a sudden, that's like a flag, I would say, for a parent or someone to say, hey, did something happen? Your behavior's changed instead of they're just a bad kid, Anyway,
Yeah,
I find it interesting.
and of course, there's been a lot of research around football and traumatic brain injuries, and they've learned a lot from that too, and also or various athletes or even veterans whose personalities have changed dramatically.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I've been taking you off the topic of your current book, Somewhere Sisters. I'll hold it up again now that I have my green screen. Are you ready to talk about this? Is there anything else you want to tell us before you get into it? I know you had twins yourself.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had twins about 6 years ago now, and that led me to well, as you can see, I write about a lot of different topics and
Yeah.
whatever sort of interesting to me in my life at the moment. So, and so one of the questions that I've always been interested, like I said earlier, I've always been interested in identity and certainly nature and nurture and twins. The study of twins has a long history of research with identity and nature versus nurture. And so I ended up connecting to a twin researcher in California. And I wrote a piece for The Atlantic about twins, and I wrote particularly about epigenetics. And epigenetics is the study of, actually, one of my twins just walked in.
Oh, let's see.
He's going over to see us. That's okay. We're
Now,
on.
I think when you come forward, we can see you better. Somehow when you go
Yeah.
backwards, you get more dark. So
Sorry about that.
no. I'm just taking a break to tell you that so that people can see you. Okay. So yeah. So epigenetics, is that the word?
Yeah, epigenetics. So essentially what I was interested in when I was studying epigenetics and writing about it was the interplay between genes and the environment. So how much your environment might impact your genes. And there's a whole field of research around that. And that was what I was looking at. So, but anyways, I met different twin researchers and twin pairs because that was part of what I was writing about for The Atlantic. And then this one particular twin pair stood out to me. They were born in Vietnam and separated at birth. And one was raised by a family in America and the other by a family in Vietnam, a biological aunt. Their birth mother could not care for them. She did not have the means to care for them. So took one of them to an orphanage. And then the other one was too sick to go into the orphanage. So she ended up being raised by her biological aunt and her aunt's partner in Vietnam. And they did not know much about each other at all. And really, they knew a little bit about each other, but nothing for many years until they one day did, and they were reunited. So I wanted to tell that story.
Did the yeah, and it's a great book. If I recommend it, but did they, I know that the twins didn't, or at least what I gathered from the book, the twins didn't know about each other until they were older. But did the aunt, the aunt must have known because she was related to the mother, right? The
Yeah,
one
I mean,
raising.
they all, the twin in Vietnam did know, because when she was 4, her moms who raised her, her biological aunt and her aunt's partner, put her on a motorbike and drove her to the orphanage. And they said she was going to beat her twin sister.
Oh.
But then by the time they got there, she learned that the sister had been adopted.
Okay.
Never got to meet her at that point. And then the other twin, she eventually heard about having a twin, but didn't really think much of it. She didn't go set off on her own as a kid to find the twin. She just lived her life.
Right.
And then they ended up being reunited as teenagers.
Yeah. I mean, it was so interesting. Again, the book is fascinating. I don't mean to tell about, give the book away, but that their backgrounds were so different. One was raised in America, going to school and college, or whatever, like an American, and the other was in the fields, dealing with the weather and the floods and, such a different life, that when they did meet, you would have thought they would just embrace and all that, but it was very different than that. That was very interesting. I can't imagine, what it would have been like, but I mean, you talked to them, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, that's another, like you, I couldn't imagine how that would have been. Dramatically different lives. One was raised Buddhist, the other was raised Catholic. One spoke Vietnamese, the other spoke English. One lived in a village, with storms that came through and sometimes wiped out the village home. Had sporadic access to electricity. It didn't have toys because, she talked about playing with like the dust and playing with building a swing set under the moon and swinging on the trees. And She didn't have store-bought toys. They would
Right.
create her own things to play with, and loved her life in Vietnam in this village. And even though it was a simple life, it was something that she really loved. The other twin was adopted with another
Yay.
adopted with another child from the orphanage. So they were not biologically related, but they were sort of raised as twins because they were dressed, their mom would dress them alike and all of this. And they were close in the orphanage and became adopted to the US together. But like I said, they grew up in a big family. So the twin in Vietnam grew up as an only child, but the twin who was raised in America grew up in a large family, lots of siblings, including the one that was adopted with her. Went to Catholic schools. Their family had a lot of money and did well for themselves, and so she had access to, privileges of a young person who has access to resources in the U.S. And grew up in they're Asian American, obviously, and grew up in a mostly predominantly white neighborhood in a suburb of Chicago. So she was, that was something that she talked about in the book. Whereas the sister in Vietnam grew up with everybody was Vietnamese. However, the mothers who adopted her in Vietnam, her biological aunt, her aunt's partner, part of a same-sex marriage. So that was the source, that was part of some bullying that did happen when she was growing up, in Vietnam. So there are different issues that they talked about throughout the book around their lives, ups and downs, like joys and hardships, and also just how different their experiences were. And certainly when I thought about them reuniting, I also thought of the kind of reunions that maybe you'd see on TV of a twin reunion or people who've long lost family. But this one was actually quite different. And it was more complicated and uncomfortable. They were 13. It's a lot happening and a lot of people involved. And so, but I appreciated that it's not just some sort of made for TV fairy tale that you might see. It was very real and had a lot of human emotions, and whether that was pain or they do eventually connect with each other, but it doesn't happen instantaneously.
And when were you writing this? Before, like after it all happened, or during it?
This was all after. So
After.
I
Okay.
used I used a technique called narrative reconstruction, and that is when the journalist is not there for the event, like
Right.
so they rely on interviews, records, photos, videos, interviews with people around them to reconstruct the events, and to just walk somebody through their lives and tell the story in detail. And you might read it and it feels like it's a scene, that feels like you were there, or that feels quite vivid, like it's but it's not, because it's been all reported through interviews or different archives and records.
Wow, cool. All right.
So I came in when they were already like 18 and had been reunited at 13.
Okay.
And now they're in their mid-20s. So it was a process of like just having people tell me the story. I did travel to Vietnam with them, and I interviewed their birth mother. I interviewed the mothers who raised the twin in Vietnam. I interviewed various family members. I met their living fourth grandmother. So I did that, and went to the orphanage and went to the village where one of the twins grew up, lived her life. So that's a part of reconstruction, because you can visit the places to understand and write about it.
Yeah, cool. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to find out what you learned about all of that.
Okay.
So let's go to the commercial.
Are you inspired? Are you living a life story you are proud to tell? Are you actively pursuing and creating the life of your dreams? Well, if not, you really need Hillary's AAA program for freedom. Just visit gettingrealwithhillary.com and schedule a time with Hillary today.
And once again, just to remind you, our new sponsor is Kokori App. Go to kokoryapp.com if you want more information on social emotional learning and how we can transform the lives of our children. So welcome back, Erika. So I know you were studying, we're talking about your book. Let me hold it up again, Somewhere Sisters. So what did you, I mean, you could talk more about the book if you want. It's fascinating, but I would like to know, like, what did you learn about the difference? You know, how much did genetics, what is it, environment versus genetics? Or, you know, what did you learn about that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I have come to understand is that throughout history, there have been these sharp swings toward genes genes matter above all else, and in shaping who we are, and we've seen that kind of science pushed in history, and then toward the other side, behaviorism. There have been researchers throughout history who said that it really only comes down to where you are raised and who raises you in your environment. And give me a child and I can turn that child into whomever I want them to be, right? And so there's these two sharp swings back and forth, back and forth. Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is it nature or is it nurture? And what I've come to understand through the research and through my own life with twins and through these twins that I wrote about is that there is a very complex interplay that happens between your genes and the environment. That's the area of epigenetics that I was mentioning before, but also there's random chance that happens. So even if you have twins with identical genes, there could be mutations, there could be certain genetic effects that flip on. The environmental effects could flip on a particular gene for one twin and not the other. And so even though they might have identical genes, which is what identical twins have, there are these differences. And even if you're like I'm raising my own twins, they're 6 now, but they're so very clearly different in so many ways. And
are they identical too?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they've been living in the same home for their whole lives. They have not been separated, but even within a home, they have some non-shared environments, which is what scientists call them. So even within the home, you might have differences in how you're raised, or one might, have a different experience with a friend or a different experience with a book, or all these little things. One might get in trouble, the other doesn't, and so what happens after that, these little experiences in their lives could change, could shape them differently. So obviously they're not clones and they're not exactly alike. And in fact, they're quite different. Now, if you have the twins who've been raised worlds apart, different languages, different lifestyles completely, they're going to have obvious different personalities in life. And yes, there also will be some similar themes in their lives. Maybe they look similar, or maybe like both of them might have, certain social similarities, maybe shy, not easy to make friends. And maybe that could be something that's genetic, because that's something that they both have experienced, even though they're completely in different worlds. So yes, there can be these similar themes, but there's also these differences. And I guess what I think is important to keep in mind with this science is to understand that it's not black and white. It's
right.
It's a complex combination. Like life is not black and white. It's nuanced, and there's there's both forces at play really, and they're working in some cases together to create who you are and your identity.
one of the I don't know if you knew that the topic of adoption, when you started this was going to be so, I don't know, I would say complicated or complex that did you have any idea when you started that that would be such an important issue in the book?
I did not know as I really did not know much about adoption, and so I came into this starting with the twins, and but as a journalist, just like I'm a journalist who doesn't necessarily know a lot about epigenetics,
Mm-hmm.
I just, you know, hit the books, talk to the researchers and the experts, and with as with twin science, there's years of research and data and many scientists who study this. With adoption, it's the same. There's decades of research um, that is out there for people to read. Many people who are studying adoption, many adoptees, and that was important to me to talk to adoptees because historically, a lot of the research even has been led by, or the research and a lot of the even literature or stories that we hear about adoption might be told from the adoptive parents' perspective, or
Mm-hmm.
people being studied. The voices that come through are the adoptive parents. That's some of the historical research around adoption. So um, I wanted to speak to people who were adoptees doing research, or who were adoptees who are centered in some of the research, or who, their voices are part of the studies, or who are writing their own novels, hosting their own podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
doing, the work out there, or also historians and psychologists. And so I did that, and I learned a lot about adoption and the whole um, reality of adoption as a system, the history of adoption transnationally, transracially, um, going to Vietnam. Obviously, I talk a lot about that history in the book, but also just in our country, dating back to adoption transnationally, intercountry adoption, which a lot of this started after World War II. So I learned about this as well, and some of the challenges, and that became important to the book for me to have as some of the context for people. So yes, this is a story about twins who are separated and reunited, but it's also a story that um, involves adoption in major ways. This is why their lives turned out the way they did, and so
Yeah.
to sort of ignore the issue of adoption or the history or what all the researchers say would have given just one side of the story that's actually much more complex, just like with
Yeah.
genes in the environment are also, it's nuanced and complex, and it's not black or white. And that was what I hope to do with that research. So I did learn a lot. Yes.
Oh, my last guest last week was a woman who had been adopted. And she said, and I don't know if you've ever looked at this part of it, she said that because she was curious about her birth mother,
Yeah.
and she did end up meeting her, but she had read, I think before she met her or before her mother gave her enough information to find her, she had read a book about the people who had given up the babies, like she was saying the cheerleader and the football player who, the girl got pregnant, and then what happened to their lives
Yeah.
having given up the babies. And
Sure.
she said, now again, I just know what she said. I didn't read the
For
book. I
sure.
don't remember the book, but she said that
Yeah.
their lives didn't turn out well, and I don't know if that's what ruined it, but they never kind of recovered.
Mm.
So that's another thing to look at, which is the effect on those people,
Oh,
you
absolutely.
know.
Effect on the birth parent. Yeah. Then
Yeah,
there has been
yeah,
research actually. There there is a lot of research out there on who are the birth mothers, and their lives as well. I mean, that's another area that you don't hear about, I guess.
right.
Like if the dominant narrative about adoption comes from adoptive parents, because maybe they all have the access to write, be able to write their own story, to write the stories of their families, or be involved in research, right?
Mm,
You hear these stories a lot, but then the stories you hear less of throughout history has been adoptees themselves. Many were children, so they weren't, now they're grown up. So you can easily hear them on social media talking and literature and whatnot. But then the adoptive parents, which many, might not have resources, might not have access to just the media or a research study.
You mean the birth? You mean
The
the
birth
birth?
parents.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
The parents, the ones who, obviously, if they had a child that ended up being adopted, there's a reason. They're struggling in some way, and so being part of a research study or writing their own life story onto a memoir is not necessarily front and center on their.
Right.
You don't get to hear those stories, but there is research out there that's doing more of that work, especially around Korea. I know that there's been research into birth mothers in South Korea, for example. A lot of that led by adoptees as well, and different movements to, to help the mothers, and for example, in Korea, or, so there's work around that, but that's a really valid point.
Yeah, I mean, and what this woman was saying was, she had, even though she was adopted and she loved her family and she was grateful, she never really felt like she belonged or was actually loved, even though she probably was, until she met her birth mother and she learned why she gave her up, and why, that it was like it filled in a hole for her. And I think, if you're adopted, you must always wonder why, you think it's your fault or something. I mean, I don't know if you found that, but what was wrong with me that they gave me up? Even though it doesn't make sense, it had nothing to do with you, probably could have been any child, but that would kind of complete it for people, I would think. And I would bet not everyone has that chance, to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, when you talk to adoptees, everybody has a different experience and story and relationship to their own adoption, and one is not the same as the other necessarily. And certainly in the book I did hear, the book that I wrote, the twin in Vietnam, for example, talked about that feeling of, especially even being bullied for her parents not wanting her. Why did they not want her? Kind of wondering that as well. But one thing I can say is that both of the twins on both sides of the world did experience, families that really loved them deeply and did everything that they could to care for them. But there is that narrative in the US, for example, of being grateful, that I talked to a lot of adoptees about this. Like, if you at all express, interest sometimes in your birth family, or sadness, or a feeling of loss, which there's a lot of research around the loss and the trauma of adoption. Even if you've had a beautiful life and a happy life, you might have these feelings, right? That don't always match up with the narrative of the fairy tale adoption that we sort of hear about in the media and in stories.
Annie.
Yeah, there's a whole world of books and movies around the fairy tale adoption story. And that can be really confusing if you aren't allowed to kind of have both of those feelings at once in your reality, and also the feeling of being grateful, but also feeling like, that it's okay that I've had pain too, and have both of these at the same time. And so I think that is something I learned a lot about, the complicated, kind of sometimes even contradictory emotions that happen within a person who's adopted, and these experiences that can also feel contradictory. You have this wonderful life, maybe with your family, but yet you have these questions about your past and who you are, whether it's your genes or your identity, or why people made the choices that they made. Or maybe you have challenges with your racial identity if you're transracially adopted. and you're kind of trying to figure out, well, I know my family loves me, but I also know that I'm very different and the world sees me differently. And how do I reconcile that in my life?
Mm.
There's a lot. And then reunion is also complicated and involves a lot of people. And that's something I learned about as well. So it's one thing to see the reunion on TV and everybody, has found the other half, as you would think that's what it is. But when you reunite, and in the case in the book, for example, that brought in then birth mothers, grandmothers, you know, um, siblings that you never knew of, all these other people who have their own trauma and sadness or experiences with this adoption that everybody's sharing a part of, in a different way. They all have their own emotions around it, and that is complicated and can be painful to engage with, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So the other sister, the non-twin,
Yeah.
that's what stuck out for me was, her birth family. And again, it wasn't the twins, but her birth family was reaching out and she was like, she couldn't deal with it. Leave me alone. I mean, that's just, I don't know if she felt bad about that. Like I felt bad for the birth family that she didn't want to have anything to do with them. And I think later on, she maybe as she got more mature, she did. But that one scene, I was like, they were crying and she was like, get away from me. But I mean, I guess it's any teenagers too,
I
but
mean, that is also, again, like I said, everybody has a different experience and has different feelings around it. And, she felt like, and you can understand it I think I could understand it if I put myself in her shoes. Like,
yeah. I'm not saying I didn't.
Oh no, I'm not. Yeah, no, I know it was complicated because I wrote it.
Yeah. It had to be hard for her. You want to, but you don't. And how do you protect yourself? Yeah, just so much complication.
Yeah, you're young.
Life.
You have your life. And the way she put it to me is she didn't need another family. She didn't, she had her life.
Yeah.
There wasn't room in her life at that point to have a whole different life,
Yeah.
and that, that's her feeling. And I want to respect that absolutely, because again, some people might spend their whole life searching and never find. There are adoptees in the book. They're not in this family, but different adoptees who are, for example, adopted after the war in Vietnam and put onto planes and sent to America as orphans, who would be adopted, but a lot of the paperwork was lost. Some of them were not orphans, and many of them have never met their families, even though they've spent their lives searching, because there's no record, there's no paperwork, there's no DNA test, and that's a hole that they have in their lives, right? But other people might not want to do that because they don't want to go down that route. So that's going to be different for everybody. So you do have that variety of experience kind of represented in the book. Also just to show that it's not one kind of experience, like a different interpretation and feeling about how complicated and hard some of these discussions about adoption can be.
Yeah. Well, I think you did an amazing job. How long did it take you to do all that research and the traveling and then but before you answer that, the mother of Isabella, the adopted mother, she was so determined to find, I don't know how you say, to get her to America. And I was wondering, I mean, it seemed from what you wrote, obviously you wrote the book, but that the aunt and the partner, it's like, you're taking away my child. Like I was kind of like, who the hell are you to be taking away the child? Even though, I mean, obviously there was more opportunity and stuff like that. And she did end up going, I think. Anything about that for you, or, you can't probably give your opinion.
Well, I mean, I think that my opinion was that I think it's it's just as complicated as you read it. And you're going to have, the reality is you're going to have all the mixed emotions. And I had them all writing. And that's clear in how I think, even if I don't come in to parts and say my opinion, like what I've written in a way you can see through that, because it's like I'm putting it in there, and that's my
Yeah.
choice to put it in there. That yeah, the mothers in Vietnam were heartbroken when
Mm.
their daughter left to reunite with her twin and move to America. At the same time, she was coming for opportunities, and like many of us have lived lives and experienced that too, right? And the reality of immigration to America is that there's this one narrative of American dream that is and opportunity and education and success, but there's also loss because you leave behind culture, family, roots. And certainly that's the story of my father. You know, he came for opportunity, and then, but yet his mother and his family is, was still and is still in Japan.
Mm.
And, you know, when his mother passed away, my grandmother, he was not there. You know, he was in America living his life. That's the reality of the experience of immigration. And so they're
Right.
feelings of pain, and they're mixed up with feelings of like opportunity, and also like creating a whole new family in the US and joy there. And so I wanted those sections to be representative of the truth and all of its complexity. And you might have these feelings of like, well, who are you?
Right.
But also understand that, that at one point the twin in Vietnam decided up for herself that she was
Right.
in the US. So
Right. And that could be any child of college age going to the US. So yeah,
or
you're
going to
right.
college when you leave your
Yeah.
kid goes to college across the country, you know, that's
Right. 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 Right.
you know, that you're going to have these emotions and of loss as as a parent, but that doesn't mean that um, that you shouldn't also feel like that. I think what is true in these sections, and as I write it, is that I am acknowledging the kind of privilege that like Westerners and have, for example, to come in and kind of make decisions on behalf of other countries, which is sort of what has happened with adoption in the U.S. You know, like I mentioned, the Vietnamese children who came after the war, the U.S. government decided to send planes and bring children to America, thinking that that was the better life. But as
Right.
he grew up, then he had struggles, and so it's the sort of assumptions that are made um, throughout the history of like adoption, for example, and also by the West to sort of dictate what is the better life, what is the better life for people who are in other countries, or for people who come from countries that are war torn or have challenges of poverty, you know, and
Yeah.
complicated, but it is something to kind of think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And thank you. This has been we just have a couple minutes left, so I want to be able to, complete it properly. I just want to thank you for, for writing the book. I'll hold it up again somewhere, sisters. You just did an amazing job, pointing out these issues, and I guess there's no clear-cut answers, which just is really, it's fascinating and gives you food for thought about all the different ramifications of all of it, so thank you for doing that. Anything you would like to say in closing?
No, thank you. This is a great interview. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm traveling, so I'm in an Airbnb right now.
Oh my God.
Not my fabulous home in the back.
Right.
But I'm glad that you were able to talk to me and do this conversation and get at a lot of the different issues raised in the book and in my work, which, as you can see, it's um, complicated in some ways and sometimes hard stuff. But I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. And is there anything you would want from the listeners to reach out, or no, just read your stuff? Like, how do they find out more about you?
I have a website. It's erikahayasaki.com. So it's just my name, Erika Hayasaki, Hayasaki.com. And
Okay.
you can email me on there. I've heard from readers of the book, and that's really nice when people send me messages. Also, all of the different stories that I worked on before the book, and my links to the previous book stories that we talked about earlier around dementia or identity.
Okay, great.
Those are on the website as well. and some writing resources for people who are interested in writing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And again, I want to thank KokoriApp.com for being our sponsor. If you want to learn more about social emotional learning, please go to KokoriApp.com. And they're a wonderful resource for your corporate team building and school social emotional learning fun. So thank you. Thank you again, Erika. And that's a wrap.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Getting Real with Hillary show. We hope you were entertained and inspired. Please subscribe to Hillary's newsletter. Go to gettingrealwithhillary.com for more freedom techniques and fantastic stories and links to other great stuff. And don't forget to tune in every week on Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on BBS Radio TV. And let's get real. Let's get connected. Let's get inspired and create that life you love.